My name is Benjamin. I'm 32 years old, and my wife, Sarah, was 29 when our marriage imploded on what should have been the happiest week of our lives. I'm telling you this story because I need to get it out. And maybe someone else going through this nightmare needs to hear they're not alone. The text message came at 3:47 a.m. on our third night in Santorini. I only saw it because I'd gotten up to get Sarah some water. She'd had too much wine at dinner and was feeling sick. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, face up, and the notification lit up the dark room like a neon sign. Missing you already. Can't wait until you're back and we can be together properly. The sender's name was Marcus, her colleague from the marketing firm where she worked. The same Marcus she'd assured me was just a friend when I'd asked about all those late nights at the office. I stood there in our honeymoon suite, holding a glass of water for my wife of 3 days, staring at a message that turned my entire world upside down. How do you process something like that? How do you even begin to understand that the person sleeping peacefully next to you has been living a lie? I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on the balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea, watching the sunrise and trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to wake her up and confront her right then. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen it, but mostly I just felt numb. Sarah and I had been together for 4 years before we got married. We met at a coffee shop near her office. I was there for a business meeting that got canceled. She was grabbing lunch between client calls. She spilled her latte on my laptop bag, and instead of just apologizing and walking away, she insisted on buying me a new bag. We ended up talking for 2 hours. She was brilliant, funny, ambitious. She had this way of lighting up when she talked about her work, about the campaigns she was developing, the clients she was helping. I fell hard and fast. Within 6 months, we were living together in my apartment downtown. Within 2 years, I'd proposed. The wedding planning was stressful, like it is for everyone, but we got through it together, or at least I thought we did. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed, the way she'd guard her phone, always keeping it face down, the sudden increase in work events and client dinners that kept her out late, the way she'd sometimes seem distant, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I justified it all. She was under pressure at work. Wedding planning was overwhelming. We were both stressed. I made excuses because I loved her, and I wanted our marriage to work. That morning in Santorini, I watched her wake up, stretch, smile at me with that same loving expression she'd given me every morning for years. "Good morning, husband," she said, like she had the previous 2 mornings. It sounded different now. It sounded like a lie. "Good morning," I managed to say back. We went through the motions of another honeymoon day. Breakfast on the terrace, walking through the whitewashed streets, taking photos in front of the blue-domed churches. I felt like I was watching someone else's life, like I was an actor, playing a role I no longer understood. That evening, while she was in the shower, I went through her phone. I know that makes me the bad guy in some people's eyes, but I needed to know the truth. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Messages going back 8 months, not just flirty texts, but detailed conversations about their feelings for each other, complaints about me, plans for after we got back from the honeymoon. There were photos too. Photos I won't describe because some things should stay private, even in a story like this. The worst part wasn't the physical betrayal, though that cut deep enough. It was reading how she talked about me, how she called our relationship comfortable but boring, how she said she was going through with the wedding because it was easier than calling it off at this point, how she told Marcus She was planning to ask for a divorce within the year, once the honeymoon photos were posted and everyone had finished congratulating us. I was her safety net, her backup plan. The guy who paid half the rent and made her look good to her family while she figured out what she really wanted. When she came out of the bathroom in her white hotel robe, hair wrapped in a towel, she found me sitting on the bed with her phone in my hands. "Benjamin, what are you doing?" I looked up at her. This woman I'd promised to love and honor just 3 days ago. This stranger wearing my wife's face. 8 months, I said quietly. Her face went white. Not the pretty flush she got when she was embarrassed, but genuinely white, like all the blood had drained away. "Benjamin, I can explain." 8 months, I repeated. "You've been sleeping with Marcus for 8 months. You planned our entire wedding while you were in love with someone else." She sat down heavily in the chair across from me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "How long have you known?" she finally asked. "Since last night. Since 3:47 a.m. to be exact, when he texted you about missing you." She put her head in her hands. "Never meant for you to find out like this." "How exactly did you mean for me to find out? When you filed for divorce next year like you told him you were planning?" She looked up at me then, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not shame, relief. Like she was tired of pretending and was almost glad it was over. "I do love you," she said, but it sounded hollow. "Just not the way I should. Not the way you deserve." "When did it start?" "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," she sighed. "Last March, at the company retreat. We were working late on a presentation, and it just happened. March 2 months after I'd proposed. She'd come home from that retreat glowing, talking about how inspired she felt, how excited she was about new projects at work. I'd thought it was because of the promotion she'd gotten. Now I knew it was because she'd found someone new. "Are you in love with him?" "Yes." The simple honesty of that answer hit harder than any elaborate explanation would have. She didn't try to soften it or qualify it, just yes. We spent the next 2 days finishing our honeymoon in a bizarre state of suspended reality. We'd already paid for everything. Changing flights would have cost a fortune, and neither of us had the energy to figure out logistics while we were falling apart. So we went through the motions. We ate breakfast. We took a boat tour. We visited museums. We slept in the same bed, but didn't touch. Other couples would smile at us, maybe comment on how sweet it was to see newlyweds. If they only knew, they were looking at two people planning the end of their marriage before it had even really begun. The flight home was the longest 8 hours of my life. Sarah slept most of the way, or pretended to. I stared out the window and tried to figure out what came next. Do you go straight to a lawyer? Do you try counseling? Do you fight for someone who's already told you they love someone else? When we got back to our apartment, though it didn't feel like ours anymore, Sarah packed a bag. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," she said, "until we figure out what we're doing." "What we're doing?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've already figured it out. You figured it out 8 months ago." She paused in her packing. "I know you hate me right now." "I don't hate you," I said, and I meant it. "I hate what you did. I hate that you lied to me for 8 months. I hate that you married me knowing you were going to leave, but I don't hate you." She started crying then. Real tears, not the delicate crying she did at movies. Ugly, painful sobs. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry, Benjamin. But sorry doesn't fix everything. Sorry doesn't give you back the trust that's been shattered. Sorry doesn't make the wedding photos on your nightstand anything other than evidence of the biggest lie you've ever lived." After she left, I called in sick to work for 3 days. I just sat in our apartment, looking at all the wedding gifts we hadn't even finished opening, trying to process what had happened. Friends and family kept calling to ask how the honeymoon was, and I didn't know what to tell them. How do you explain that your marriage ended before it began? My brother Jake was the first person I told the truth to. He came over on the third day when I hadn't been returning his calls. "You look like hell," he said when I opened the door. "Thanks. That's exactly what I was going for." He followed me into the living room, which was still covered with gift boxes and thank you cards I'd been trying to write. "Where's Sarah?" "At her sister's. Everything okay?" I handed him her phone. I'd kept it, though I'm not sure why. Maybe I was hoping I'd dreamed the whole thing. Maybe I wanted proof it was real. Jake read through some of the messages, his expression getting darker with each one. "Jesus Christ, Ben, when did you find this?" "Our third night in Santorini." "And you finished the honeymoon?" "What else were we going to do? Have a screaming fight in paradise?" Jake set the phone down and looked at me. Really looked at me, the way only a brother can. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Everyone keeps asking me that, and I don't know." "Do you want to try to work it out?" "How do you work out 8 months of lies? How do you build a marriage with someone who married you as a placeholder?" Jake didn't have an answer for that. Nobody did. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork. Sarah had moved in with Marcus, though she claimed they were just friends helping each other through a difficult time. Even at the end, she was still lying. The worst part wasn't the divorce proceedings or splitting up our stuff or figuring out what to tell people. The worst part was the quiet moments when I'd catch myself thinking about calling her, or when I'd see something that reminded me of a good time we'd had together, because despite everything, we had had good times. 4 years doesn't get erased just because the ending was a disaster. I'd find myself wondering if there was something I could have done differently, if I'd been more attentive, more romantic, more whatever she needed. Would she have chosen me instead? But that's not how it works. You can't love someone into loving you back the way you deserve. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. The same coffee shop where Sarah and I had met, actually. The universe has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he wasn't sure whether to pretend he didn't know who I was or try to make conversation. "Benjamin," he said finally, "how are you?" "I'm fine," I said, which was mostly true by then. "How's Sarah?" She's good. We're good." I nodded. "I'm glad." He looked surprised. "Really?" "Really. She deserves to be happy, and she deserves to be with someone who makes her feel the way you do." "I never meant for it to happen the way it did," he said. "The lying, the sneaking around. That's not who I am." "But it is who you were," I said. "For 8 months, that's exactly who you were." He didn't have an answer for that either. I left him standing there and walked home to my new apartment across town. It was smaller than the place Sarah and I had shared, but it was mine. Really mine. I'd furnished it myself, chosen the paint colors myself, made it into a space that felt like home. That night, I finally took off my wedding ring. I'd been wearing it all those months, even after the divorce was final, because it had become such a part of me that I forgot it was there. But sitting in my new living room, in my new life, it felt like time to let go of the last piece of who I used to be. I put the ring in a small box in my desk drawer, not because I was saving it for anything, but because throwing it away felt too dramatic. It was still a symbol of something, even if that something hadn't turned out the way I'd hoped. People ask me if I'm bitter, if I hate love or marriage or trust in general. The answer is no. What happened with Sarah taught me something important. You can't build a life with someone who's already building one with someone else. You can't love someone into being the person you need them to be. But it also taught me that I survived something I thought would destroy me. I learned that I'm stronger than I gave myself credit for, and that being alone is better than being with someone who sees you as a convenience rather than a choice. Would I do it again? Fall in love? Get married? Take that risk? Ask me in a few years. Right now, I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to be the husband Sarah needed me to be. But I'll tell you this. If I ever do find someone who wants to build a life with me, really build it together instead of just going through the motions, I'll know the difference. Because once you've experienced being someone's backup plan, you never forget what it feels like. And you never accept it again. The honeymoon photos are still in a box somewhere. I haven't looked at them since we got back, and I don't plan to. But I don't need to throw them away either. They're just pictures of two people who thought they knew what they wanted. One of them was wrong, and one of them was lying. But for a few days in Santorini, we both smiled for the camera and believed we were happy. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all some stories get. A few good days and a lot of hard lessons. Maybe learning to be okay with that is what growing up really means. I'm 32 years old, I'm divorced, and I'm starting over. It's not the story I thought I'd be telling at this point in my life, but it's the story I've got. And for the first time in a long time, I'm curious to see how it ends.